If you've got 99 problems, buying an ultrawide monitor will definitely add one, and possibly a whole heck of a lot more. But is it still worth it? Yes, except actually no, except it depends on you. There's a lot of pros and cons to buying an ultrawide monitor, and if you're considering this decision, you need to be well educated on what those pros and cons are and which camp you'll fall into on the is it worth it? If you hear my kids running around upstairs, sorry, this YouTube channel's a hobby I do in my free time. They're playing with grandma, I'm in the basement. So a couple of years ago, I went ahead and bought an ultrawide monitor, and I've actually switched over to that 16:9 non-ultrawide monitor as my main gaming monitor, although I still do use this from time to time. So I've had a lot of personal experience with both, and here's my thoughts. First of all, is it worth it? What are you actually buying? Because you are spending more. An ultrawide monitor, generally, if you're looking at the exact same specs, so maybe 1440p, and then a certain refresh rate, a certain monitor technology with a certain, image quality in terms of colors and motion blur and all of that, and then you look for exactly the same specs, but increased out into a 21:9 aspect ratio, you will generally be paying more for those specs on the ultrawide. So this is going to cost you more. And what are you actually buying for that extra money? Generally, you are buying extra space on the sides. Hey, ultrawide, a 1440p monitor of the same specs might cut you off, and then ultrawide gains you a bit on the end. Now, in some games, that means, you get some extra stuff on the sides, which might increase your immersion into that world. It's wrapping, or you might get a nice curve where it kind of wraps around, you feel really drawn in. But not only are you spending more money on the monitor itself, this actually comes at a cost in terms of gaming performance, and not everybody considers this. So if you have a GPU that can just get the job done at a standard 1440p resolution, if you buy ultrawide, you are now having to run about 30% more pixels, a little bit more than that, on the sides, which is now going to increase your GPU demand by about 30%, which means you are now getting either a lower frame rate, or you're having to turn down settings, or you're having to buy a more expensive GPU to keep up. So there's a lot you're paying to get this experience. And is that little extra bit on the sides worth it? And do you always even get that? Because honestly, in my opinion, the biggest problem with ultrawide monitors is that unless console gaming and televisions switch over to ultrawide at some point, then it's always going to be an afterthought for gaming developers. It just is. Because gaming developers are not going to be targeting ultrawide as their primary focus when designing the game. Now, ultrawide support has gotten better over time to where most big AAA games, and a lot of smaller ones as well, do offer some form of ultrawide support, and sometimes it's perfect. But it's never the main focus of game design. Some games just literally will not allow it, and a lot of times you can fix that with a user-made patch or mod that you can install, but that's a hassle. And then other games that do allow it don't do it perfectly. In-game cutscenes are often going to be letterboxed in, and then the worst ones are when the in-game cutscene is actually 21:9, but then it doesn't fill your 21:9 screen because the game is just letterboxes it into the list. Like, you end up with letterboxes on all the sides. It's really frustrating. And again, sometimes, but not always, there are user-made mods that you can install that fix this, but again, not always, and that's a big hassle. So just understand that not every game is going to work perfectly in ultrawide. Some games you can make work in ultrawide that weren't actually programmed that way by the developers, but that's going to be a headache. And then there are some games that just will not ever work properly. And so you're paying a lot more for this experience, but you don't get it in every single game. Now, the games that don't get it, can you just run letterboxed in? Yeah, but now you have some glowing gray bars on the sides, which have the exact opposite effect of increasing immersion. When it works beautifully, though, it is fantastic, especially if you're getting in on a nice curve with a high-end display in racing games. I can find, and like flight simulator games, this can be amazing. But again, that's not every game. So just realize that if you're buying into ultrawide and you're thinking that the support is going to be flawless and you're going to be able to do this in every game, that is complete nonsense, and you are going to have some headaches unless you're just only playing one game that you bought this for that you know supports it well. And this is not likely to change because, like I said, console gaming and TVs is where most developers for most games are spending most of their time. And that's not ultrawide. Okay, so if it's worth it for you, then maybe you still want to grab this, but you might also want to consider some alternatives because, like I said, I've actually switched off of ultrawide. I moved over to a large 4K OLED screen. Now, this is also not for everybody and has its pros and cons, but I'm bringing up in the ultrawide discussion because I can actually still play at ultrawide on that screen when I want to in specific games, but I don't have to. That can also letterbox. Just like an ultrawide screen can letterbox off the sides to give you a normal 16:9 display, a 16:9 screen can also letterbox in the top and the bottom to give you an ultrawide aspect ratio. And so you can actually do it either way. So wait a minute, if I buy a large 4K display, especially OLED, where it can turn off the pixels on the top and the bottom so they're not glowy the way that they are on an ultrawide display, which are currently not available in OLED, then it's actually not distracting to have the letterbox. And if 4K is hard to run, this has kind of the opposite experience of what you get on an ultrawide, which is, okay, the game's too hard to run in 4K, letterbox the top and the bottom, and you're now reducing the GPU load compared to 4K, and it's now making the game easier to run. And now you're getting that ultra-wide resolution, and obviously you would only do this in games that support it well, okay? So I'm just saying you might want to consider that option. Now, there are some definite cons to that option, which is, number one, if you're doing the OLED route, OLED has its own issues with like screen burn-in, and that's going to be the biggest concern. Other than that, if you can afford it, OLED is like literally the perfect thing for monitor technology. It is fantastic. Watch some of my other videos where I talk about it, but burn-in can be an issue. But guys, there's a simple solution. Everybody worries about this so much. Okay, sure, I'd like you to buy it from my affiliate link in my description if I put it there, but in reality, that's helping me, that's not helping you. What you should actually do if you're buying OLED is buy it from a store that offers an extended warranty that covers burn-in. Okay, a lot of times buying an extended warranty on a product is stupid waste of money. Not for an OLED screen, and not if it covers burn-in specifically. Now, don't assume that your warranty will cover burn-in. Check that it covers burn-in. Buy it from someone that gives that as an option. Now, where offers that, I'm not gonna go out of my way to like accidentally say it wrong in this video. So talk about it in the comment section, look it up online, find a retail that offers a burn-in warranty on OLED screens for a few years. Some of them offer up to 5 years, buy it there. Now burn-in's not a problem. There you go. So the other issue other than burn-in of comparing letterboxing and OLED into just buying an ultra-wide monitor is the ultra-wide monitors do offer a bit of a curve. And so if you're doing that on the OLED's TVs, like the LG C1 I've got here, or there are the gigabyte OLED monitor now, that's basically the same panel, but they're not curved. And so one immersive feature on the ultrawides is a lot of times you can get that wraparound curve, which you're not getting there. I don't personally miss it very much, but some people I know who play like racing sims really like having that curve. Also, ultrawide does offer the more extreme ultrawides, like the 32:9 aspect ratio, which really isn't an experience that you can get on like letterboxing in the TV, at least not at a reasonable, vertical size. However, the 32:9 monitors have all of the problems I mentioned for the normal ultrawides at 21:9. Except and then some, right? In the games that don't support it, you've got even more letterboxing happening, and the games that actually support 32:9 well are maybe even rarer, and then the increase on the GPU demand, again, is even more. So keep all of that in mind. So for me personally, I've actually switched over to primarily gaming at 4K on the OLED, and on games that are extremely demanding or games where I want the ultra-wide experience, I just letterbox it in, and since I have a good warranty on that thing, I'm not even slightly concerned about the burn-in. However, I do still use the ultra-wide for productivity. And so that's another use case for this. I really like the fact that I have the increased space to have more windows open side by side, things like that. Sometimes I just like working on a TV like that. For productivity stuff, especially with OLED burn-in potential, that's a bit of an issue where I don't have that concern here. So, I mean, if money and space on your desk is not an issue, I mean, I think this is the dream setup. I've got both, okay? Not everybody can afford that. Thank you, YouTube ad revenue. So if you can't afford both, I don't know. Personally, I'm preferring that. But you can get into ultrawides a little bit cheaper than you can on that. Although again, for the really high-end ones, the fact that TVs can be mass-produced means a lot of times you can actually get a pretty steep discount on those. I've seen them going for about $1,000 recently, and a high-end ultrawide can run you that much or more. So, is this for you? Maybe. Let me know in the comments section what do you think, and have an excellent day.